Maryland Nonprofits is the statewide association of all nonprofits. We have 1,200 members across the state, and there are 37,000 nonprofits in the state of Maryland who are really serving on the front lines of our community during the pandemic and are a real engine of economic activity. So I have a little bit of background noise in my house, but if anyone else also does, please do mute your lines. So we will be recording today's call, and I did want to let everybody know that Maryland Latinos Unidos is a program of Maryland nonprofits, so we're proud to be merged with this important equity-focused organization. And would just again welcome Senator Chris Van Hollen, a super champion for nonprofits. His work on the Paycheck Protection Program to ensure nonprofits were included brought more than $500 million into Maryland's nonprofit sector, and he subsequently helped expand and improve and extend that act to make it more accessible to more nonprofits who are serving their communities for greater equity and quality of life. So I just want to remind everyone that we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we are nonpartisan. So we will be delving deeply into policy, but we will be avoiding politics today. And again, so Senator, a couple of other colleagues who are going to speak before you're formally introduced. So thank you so much for joining us. And it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Veronica Kuhl, who is the chair of Maryland Latinos Unidos and a board member of Maryland Nonprofits. And I had the pleasure to meet Veronica in 2020, and I think I was the last person in Maryland to not already know you, Veronica. The most well-connected, action-oriented person I've ever met. So welcome, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Heather. Good morning, everyone. Muy buenos días a todos. Senator, it's so fantastic to have you here. Katia, so good to have you here. I, along with many of you watching, have been fighting the good fight for a long time, especially for our Latino community. And when the pandemic hit in March, we realized we were providing Band-Aids, beautiful, wonderful, gorgeous Band-Aids, but for our own very tiny neighborhoods, our own little tiny buckets, good work, but never sustainable, never amplified. So I connected with a couple of sisters, Delegate Jocelyn Peña Melnick, Cecia Fuentes, Elda Devari, and we discovered that Maryland did not have a cohesive, integrated point of contact for Hispanic issues, in particular pandemic issues. And one of the reasons we're seeing the numbers we're seeing is our Latinos don't have a voice. We don't have a seat at the table. We are unable to advocate for ourselves because we're not even in the room, let alone at the table. So the genesis of Maryland Latinos Unidos started last spring. We have been doing a lot of this work for 30 years. There's some wonderful partners that are part of our work. Don't want to demean any of that, but we know we don't have a nonpartisan statewide group like this. And the effort is to get our small grassroots organizations that are out there, Latino-led, Latino structure, Latino operated, to be amplified, capacity building, so that when I'm long gone, when Heather's long gone, when the senator's long gone, the work continues. We're building legacy, sustainable legacy, so that our community can be here. We've heard the pandemic described 50 different ways. I'll tell you that I personally believe it was a generational catastrophe. And if we don't fix these disparities, if we don't address immigration, if we don't fix these issues sustainably, we're going to be having this conversation in 15 years again. So when we formed under the auspices of Maryland Nonprofits, we had the privilege of getting a lot of talent interested in the executive director role. So imagine a brand new young organization, you know, gritty, ready to fight, ready to go. We needed a leader. We needed a doer. We needed someone that had the same vision we had. And we won the lottery. So I love to introduce my partner in crime, Dr. Gabriela Lemus. So she's a Maryland, lives in Maryland, knows our community, but has worked at the national level, knows who the players are at the national level, both on the fundraising side, the advocacy side. And she is moving mountains. You would think watching us, we've been doing this for ages. We're nascent, we're babies. We've been at this for just months. But because of Gabriela, because of the infrastructure at Maryland Nonprofits, Maryland Latinos Unidos is really impacting Maryland. We're that annoying bug that just bites you and harasses you until we get what we need, because we've never had that opportunity. So I want to turn it over to Gabriela, not because she's a bug and not because she's annoying, but because she has the expertise, she has the bandwidth, the capacity to get us into those rooms, to get us a seat at the table, and to advocate in the most strategic way possible for us to be represented and to really get the funding and the access and the change in policy that our community needs to overcome all the challenges we've had, but thrive and continue to contribute. So it's a pleasure to be here with you. And Gabriela, again, I could hug you for what you told me yesterday, but I just
virtual hug. We can't
welcome you.
Yet. We're getting ready though. We have big news coming.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Veronica. I'm proud to be a bug in the senator's ear. How's that?
Anytime.
Okay. Hopefully I won't bite though. I'll just, whisper. On that happy note, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Gracias a todos. Bienvenidos. For this incredible discussion we're going to have with Senator Chris Van Hollen. We're going to discuss immigration policy, some of the significance. I'd like to put this, I always try to contextualize. So I want to put this in a larger, more holistic thinking, like it's immigration and significance for the U.S. economy, and more importantly for the state of Maryland. Since early last year, obviously, Veronica just said it, the pandemic has been at the forefront of our collective psyche, but there's a lot of other challenges we're also facing. And generally speaking, immigration is an issue that is difficult to discuss and to consider at times, because there's so many different directions to approach the issue from a policy perspective, right? But also because of how people react to the idea. Some people are, I feel like we have a national tension between this great pride of being a nation of immigrants and then the more fear-mongering, nativistic, xenophobic type of discussion where there's invaders at the gate trying to take over, etc. And I think it's rare that we get to have a calm, thoughtful conversation and rational conversation as communities about what the process and consequences really entail, what it all means when viewed through this holistic lens. We get the bits and pieces, but not so much the big picture, and which is also why I so love having Senator Van Hollen here. Heather mentioned it before. I mean, his knowledge on policy is out of bounds. He's actually spoken at events that I've hosted in other organizations, and it doesn't matter the issue. He knows something and has the ability to speak on it. So part of what we're going to do today is contextualize, like I said, the needs of the country and the state, but also what is the role of immigrants in our national and global economy, how we face that in today's pandemic. We also have to think about it's often immigrants and Latinos generally who are feeding us, clothing us, working in those essential jobs that keep the economy rolling, that have kept the economy rolling, whether it's in healthcare or agriculture, food processing, and of course, here in Maryland, our crab industry, our seafood industry, because they're helping to keep that industry secure. So I'm really grateful to you, Senator, for being willing to lead on this front, especially now when everything feels still a little uncertain, even as vaccines are getting into arms. There's a lot to consider. And I also want to raise that economically, we've also been impacted, but there's been bills that have been passed or that are possibly about to be passed that support many of us, those of us, especially Latinas, women who've lost their jobs, like the American Recovery Act. And then we have a new infrastructure proposal. How does that intersect with immigration? How does that intersect with the American Recovery Act? I mean, that's a potential $2 trillion on the table that really will address the needs of our national infrastructure beyond crumbling bridges, which are crumbling, literally. And we're talking about what does an advanced industrialized society consider infrastructure. That's broadband. That's childcare for women. If we learned anything in this pandemic is that women were so hard hit because we didn't have the infrastructure in place to support us. But that's also building up our nonprofits because we help bridge, I guess. We're not a crumbling bridge, though. I want to differentiate. Bridge between the different challenges. So this brings me to my original point about how we fit all these pieces together in a broader national policy that reflects our national desire for equity, for tolerance, for economic prosperity for everyone. So allow me to welcome our esteemed Senator, Senator Chris Van Hollen, invite him to begin to share with us his thoughts about the various immigration proposals that are on the table, the Secure Act, which he's co-sponsored, and we'll explain a little bit about, the U.S. Citizenship Act, which is also a big piece, a comprehensive piece of legislation that's actually massive. The DREAM Act, and there were 3 executive orders that President Biden signed that I think sort of frame our discussion, which have to do with family reunification, with how do we deal with the Americas as a region, especially Central America, and also immigrant integration. So earlier this year, Senator, you and your colleagues, including your fellow Senator Ben Cardin, reintroduced the Safe Environment from Countries Under Repression and in Emergence. That's a long title, sir. The Secure Act, which is legislation to allow qualified TPS recipients to apply for legal permanent residency. How does that TPS model, and TPS, for those who don't know, is temporary protected status that's granted to folks who have been in crisis, et cetera. But it's something that we have a history of, as these folks have been here up to 30 years. But so how do you see that fitting into the larger immigration question? And more broadly, what do all these pieces mean for our state? Thank you, Senator. Welcome. Bienvenido.
Well, it's great to be with you, Dr. Lemus. Thank you for that introduction. Thanks for laying out some of the key issues, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. It's great to be with Heather, who's done just a fantastic job leading Maryland nonprofits, which plays such an important role, both in normal times, but also really stepped up during this pandemic. Thank you, Heather, to all your members. To Veronica, I've known Veronica for years. You're right, Heather. Veronica knows everybody in Maryland, and it's great that she launched Latinos Unidos under the umbrella of the Maryland nonprofits. And Dr. Lemus, it's good to be with you again. We were together on a panel I organized to discuss the inequities in the vaccine distribution. So before I talk about the immigration bills, I do want to just quickly unpack some of the other things you mentioned, because the American Rescue Plan really was an important bill. The earlier bills, the CARES Act that we passed about a year ago on a bipartisan basis, was very important. So were the updates to that. But the American Rescue Plan was vital to finally defeat this pandemic, to help those who were most in need, and to give our economy a boost. And as you mentioned, we're now going to be taking up the American Jobs Act, and I hope we'll be able to get all these things over the finish line with your help. But the American Rescue Plan did include things like an extension of the PPP program, which started out a year ago in a sort of bumbling rollout, but it was improved over time to focus on small businesses most in need. I was also pleased that we were able to find the help for families and make sure that that $1,400 payment could go to mixed status households. As you know, that was not part of the original CARES Act. Republicans, and I know this is a factual statement, not a partisan statement, opposed that back in the CARES Act, but we were successful both in December and then part of the American Rescue Plan as part of the relief. And as you know, the child tax credit provisions are really very important and will, lift 84,000 Maryland kids out of poverty. And I'm determined with my colleagues to make that permanent. Right now, it extends during this emergency period. Also provisions on child care tax credits that are refundable to help as people hopefully are able to go back to work, to help families find secure childcare. And you also, that is a vital part of our infrastructure, and funds for childcare centers, Head Start programs, and the like. So the American Rescue Plan was really important, and it was important also to address the inequities in the vaccine distribution. I was pleased the Biden administration is now directing more vaccine to community health centers so that we can get it more quickly into communities in need. Now, immigration, if you just look at Maryland, you can see that we are a much stronger and more dynamic community and state and also country because of immigrants. And this is a passing immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform, has been a goal of many of us for a very long time. And I won't go through the whole history here, but there was a time when the Senate passed comprehensive immigration reform, but it never received a vote in the House. The Citizenship Act that you mentioned is the broadest of the pieces of legislation. As you know, when President Biden and Kamala Harris came to office, they laid out their comprehensive immigration proposal. We took that and converted it into legislation, and Senator Mendez introduced it. I'm a proud co-sponsor with him, and it is comprehensive. It would provide a path to permanent residence and citizenship for TPS recipients, dreamers, people on DACA. It would also provide for frontline workers, essential workers, citizenship, and it would actually provide a path to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented individuals in the United States of America. It also has provisions on border security. It also would hire more immigration judges so that we could hear cases more quickly. That is the most comprehensive bill. Then there are a number of other bills that have been introduced that take pieces of that. The Secure Act, which I introduced last Congress and reintroduced again this year with Senator Cardin and others, would provide a permanent status and then ultimately a path to citizenship for TPS recipients. The bills that have already passed the House this year in March were the Dreamers and Promise Act. And those bills, which I strongly support in the Senate as well, both provided security for TPS recipients and Dreamers. And then there's another bill I'm also a co-sponsor of, introduced by Senator Padilla, our new colleague from California, that would provide a path to citizenship for essential workers. So you have different bills that have been introduced addressing different components of immigration policy, and then you have the most comprehensive one. And we're going to need we're going to need your help. Sorry about that. Let me turn that off. We're going to need the help of our Maryland Latino community, but really through your allies in other states around the country to get this over the finish line. Because unfortunately, we don't have as much Republican support as we would like. And that, again, is not a partisan statement, it's a factual statement. For example, on the Secure Act, despite our efforts, we still don't have a Republican co-sponsor. And that's just one piece of this overall challenge, an important one, but one piece. We've been working very hard to get the support of Senators Scott and Rubio, because with the new administration, TPS was granted to Venezuela, and we've been working very hard with the Venezuelan community in Florida to get those two senators on board. But I'm happy to, why don't we have I'm looking forward to the conversation this morning, but I just wanted to lay out the different pieces here. And now we can talk about the challenge and how we can try and get this through.
Well, that's a great segue because I was going to ask you about timing and sequencing, and what your thoughts are on how we can be helpful. You laid out, some of the, that we have to, I think, well, there's two thoughts. One is we have this large comprehensive piece, and we've passed comprehensive bills in the past, and we have not necessarily passed the smaller pieces. So in terms of energy, how do we push forward collectively? I think that's a bigger question for us as a nonprofit and for our community. But also we want to be strategic and intelligent about this and helpful, because at the end of the day, we want to help you be your advocates on the ground, pushing your colleagues to continue to join you, those who are your allies and partners, and then also for those who are not as sure, make that case for them. So maybe on timing and sequencing, do you, in your crystal ball in the Senate, do you have a sense of possibility of when different pieces might move or be introduced on that front? I mean, is there something we should think about
Sure.
that we haven't thought of?
Well, all of the bills I mentioned have been introduced. They've been introduced in the House and in the Senate. And the bill that's passed so far is the bill that passed out of the House, which was the bill that dealt with DACA recipients and TPS recipients, right? It was the Dreamers and Promise Act. So that created some momentum. That bill is now in the United States Senate. It passed the House. It had a little bipartisan support, not a lot, but it had some bipartisan support. So that is kind of the starting point for the conversation right now in the Senate. But we have been engaged with our, Republican Senate colleagues on these questions. Senator Durbin is the lead Senate sponsor on the DREAM Act portion. I am the sponsor on the Secure Act, along with Senator Cardin and others. And, we've been in dialogue with our Republican colleagues, along with Senator Menendez and others. But so far, we haven't been able to get the support we need. And, you probably saw, you may have seen, there was an op-ed by former President George W. Bush just the other day in the Washington Post, talking about the importance of immigration reform to our country and making sure we have a sensible system of welcoming immigrants. But sadly, and again, this is just an analytical statement, not a political statement. But since George W. Bush left office, the Republican Party in the House and the Senate has been far less embracing of immigration reform. And that's been our challenge. We continue to look for ways. We want to, think we support border security. We want secure borders, and that will be part of any agreement. But so far, we haven't attracted enough Republican support on these bills. And here's the other challenge. And, in order to overcome a filibuster, it's not enough to get 2 or 3 Republican senators, right? You need to get to 60. We have 50 Democratic senators. That means you need 10. So even if we're successful at getting a couple Republican senators on board, and I think we can be, getting to 10 is a bigger challenge. So what that means is we got to either keep pushing or finding a way through political pressure to get more Republicans, and you probably heard this, we are exploring the idea of how we might be able to incorporate some of these proposals into what's called the budget reconciliation process. And that's a process that we use to pass the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan, as you know, unfortunately, despite our efforts, did not have a single Republican vote either. So but that was passed through this procedure called budget reconciliation. And because immigration reform does have an economic and budget impact. So for example, it strengthens Social Security. It may, and I just stress may, be possible to put that under the umbrella of budget reconciliation if the parliamentarian agrees with our analysis. And in that scenario, you might be able to pass some of these things with 51 votes instead of overcoming the filibuster hurdle.
Yeah. That is a big hurdle. One that it made my heart leap when you said it. But also this idea. So you raised something that I think is really important for us to consider, which is the economic benefit that immigrants bring to the country, the support that they provide, we provide to Social Security. Even the undocumented, when they file their taxes, they file them with an ITIN number, an identification number. It may not be Social Security, but they are paying taxes. And they're also paying into Social Security and Medicare because that's the law. So I wonder, is there, this was not one of the questions I was going to ask you originally, but now I'm thinking about it. How can we maybe, I'm going to ask you for messaging advice, on that economic forefront to bring that to the table. I think we all agree, and we know it intuitively, that we're contributing to this economy and helping not just sustain it, but help grow it. And what that means. Do you think there might be some inroads through that direction?
I do. I think that that's a very important part of the argument, to both talk about how immigrants are really helping, make our economy more dynamic. And that, far from taking away jobs from others, they're actually generating more economic activity and allowing people to build and create more jobs for more people. Because you just put your finger on the, one of the fundamental, questions, right? You'll hear opponents of immigration reform argue that immigrants are taking jobs away, from people who are already here. When in fact, all the evidence indicates that immigrants help grow the overall size of the economy and help create more jobs. And we know that from all the, small business owners and small businesses launched by immigrants. And it just does create that vitality and dynamism in our communities on the economic front, on the cultural front, but for the purposes we're talking about in terms of economic growth and job opportunities. So that is important. I also do stress the other elements that we were just talking about, which is the contributions to Social Security, because everybody in the country has an interest in making sure we have a strong, solid Social Security system, and the immigrants are paying into that system, and that's benefiting everybody else. And to the extent that we have comprehensive immigration reform, there will be more people paying in, because the reality, as we know, is there's still some employers who are not, not paying into Social Security for the people they hire. And so to the extent that people can come out of the shadows, then and become, contributing and fully openly contributing members of our society and community, more people will be paying into Social Security, which will further strengthen it. So it's just a very clear example of how comprehensive immigration reform is good for everybody in the country.
Thank you. My brain is on fire. I'm getting a lot of different ideas. I'm even thinking maybe we should reach out to former President Bush and ask him to help us with some of the messaging with his colleagues in the Republican Party. That's down the road. We'll work that out later. But I want to turn a little bit to something that's a little more sensitive, but equally important to the state of Maryland, which is Central America. I know that on the nativistic side, there's that fear of invaders at the border, and yet these invaders are children. in many cases. We're seeing a growth in unaccompanied minors crossing into the United States. And the reason I raise it for Maryland is because we are a place that receives refugees and asylees, and we're proud of that. We're well known for that. And I guess my question is more about how, because you're also on the Foreign Affairs Committee, is there what is the thought on taking a more regional approach because I know in some of the bills there's some components about addressing that, and the President Biden has a gentleman, I forgot his name, oh, shame on me, Zuniga, I think, who is handling it through the State Department on the regional integration side, because there's an economic aspect to that as well. Are there any thoughts about addressing it, root causes, and then with the children and the unaccompanied minor, you know, how the bills that we have on the table can help us support this reunification of families? A lot of their family members are already here, and many of them are actually in Maryland, especially in Montgomery County and even in Baltimore City, and I believe Prince George's as well. So any thoughts that you can share with us on what you're seeing in that committee from the foreign affairs perspective?
Yes, and
sorry about the quagmire.
No, they're sort of there are two pieces to that, but they're obviously clearly related, right? There's the immediate situation in the border with unaccompanied adults, and the need to make sure we address that in a humane fashion. And then there's the issue of, you know, what's happening in so many of these Central American countries that is, you know, pushing people to make that sometimes long and sometimes very dangerous, right, trek to the border. So on the second piece, the Biden administration is working hard as part of its strategy to address you know, some of those factors that, you know, drive people to leave. And we all know that there are many issues, from violence in the country, in some of these countries, political violence, natural disasters that haven't been adequately addressed. And so there is going to be an effort to significantly boost sort of U.S. assistance, but not just direct assistance, but, you know, try to build more economic opportunity overall through trade and other things with the United States. And in the during the Obama administration, you may remember there was a process by which people could apply for asylum from their home countries. And that mechanism was available, and it meant that you could have your case reviewed and processed, considered by a judge, without having to come to the border. That process, unfortunately, was shut down during the Trump administration. So I know that, you know, the Biden administration is going to look to, you know, restart that piece of it. So a big part of the Biden administration strategy is, as you said, to try to address, you know, some of the indigenous factors that cause mass migration. Now, in terms of the situation at the border now, you know, President Biden has said that he's not going to turn away unaccompanied adults. He's not going to turn away kids at the border and just say, turn around and, you know, put them back into danger. We want to have a humane system. What that has meant is a lot of unaccompanied minors, a lot of kids are first go in, as you know, the process is you first go into the process of Customs and Border Patrol, and then you're transitioned into the system run by the Department of Health and Human Services. And that whole system has been stressed because of the surge in unaccompanied minors at the border. But the Biden administration is working very hard to make sure that those kids are quickly transitioned into the Health and Human Services system, and then from there reunited with parents or relatives or others who have a family connection. And so that is the focus right now in terms of the immediate needs is building greater capacity outside of the Customs and Border Patrol units to take unaccompanied adults, and then make sure that they're placed safely in families, whether they're in Maryland or around the country. So that's been the approach taken by the Biden administration.
When I just want to highlight this final point you just made about bringing them into families. Do they go into the, I'm sorry for my ignorance. Do you know if they go into the foster care system? I think some of them do, right?
I think my understanding, it depends on what the relationship is between the child and the family. I'm not sure, like if it's somebody's daughter or son who's arriving, I don't think that's the foster care system. If it's it's some other kind of relationship, that may be the case. I'd have to explore that as well.
Oh, okay. Just curious. I know you have a hard stop at 9:50. So what I want to do is ask you a big question and maybe invite some of my colleagues to ask you questions as well. So my big question, big picture thinking, how do you envision, we've talked about the American Recovery Act, we've talked about possibilities of this infrastructure bill and immigration. So when you look at legislation from a holistic perspective, what is your approach and how do you see it interconnecting?
Well, they are
a lot of food for thought. I'm sorry.
Well, no, but that is exactly right. And the Infrastructure Modernization Plan, which is called the American Jobs Act, is a very ambitious proposal, and it does look holistically at what constitutes our infrastructure. I mean, infrastructure includes, traditional infrastructure like roads and bridges and transit, which, by the way, we need to build out substantially, public transit options. But it also includes, 100% connectivity to high-speed internet, broadband. We need to end the digital divide, and that is something actually that does, bridge parties, because it's an issue in urban areas, suburban areas, and rural areas, of course. So, but that's part of 21st century infrastructure. But as you pointed out, and the others, we have people talk about building roads to get people to and from work. But if you're a family with kids, it's also important that you have quality childcare. If you're a family with, an ailing senior loved one, it's really important that you have adequate senior care. And so there's a big push in this bill to provide for senior care, at home care, and increase the pay of a lot of the essential workers, who include a lot of immigrants on the front lines there. And then, of course, affordable housing is part of infrastructure. Schools that are part of infrastructure. So this is it is an ambitious plan, the American Jobs Plan. And the next plan we expect to see is going to be the American Families Plan. My guess is the president will roll this out within the next couple days, because he's scheduled to deliver an address to Congress, a joint session next week. That will focus more on the investments in things like early childhood education, K through 12, workforce training. The way I think about it is the infrastructure plan is kind of the hardware, and the American Families Plan is the software, right? I mean, you have school buildings, and then you have, teachers and other educators. So that plan, the next one, will also be a very ambitious plan. And what all of this is intended to do is to provide much more greater economic opportunity to more people, to have a more inclusive economy. Just to take, for example, senior care. As I mentioned, the average wage of a home healthcare worker is about $11 an hour. I mean, but those jobs are incredibly demanding. And we need to do a lot better. I mean, I support raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. But the whole idea is to, build an economy that works better for everybody. And when everybody has more income, they are spending more, they're buying more goods and services. And that has that benefits everybody. As opposed to the top-down view of the economy, where the theory of many of my Republican colleagues has been, you provide tax cuts to very wealthy people and they will then spend more, it will trickle down. That has been a failed model. So this is an effort to sort of empower people economically from the bottom up. As we build and modernize our infrastructure, address climate change and all sorts of other issues. So it is a very expansive plan. The president has put forward a way to pay for it. The first piece of this, and I anticipate he will have a way to pay for the second piece as well. There are a lot of people who say they're for modernizing our infrastructure, but then they don't want to pay for any of it. Wow. They don't want to come up with any revenue. But the president has done both. And so he's invited our Republican colleagues to provide input, to provide alternatives. If they have another way to raise money to pay for the infrastructure, we're all ears. Let us know. So this is going to be a great debate.
It will be a great debate. It's exciting. So we have one of our colleagues, Juliana Valencia Banks, who would like to ask you a question. Juliana.
Okay.
Hi, good morning. It actually wasn't to ask a question. It's to clarify a question that you had and the senator had. The overwhelming majority of unaccompanied minors that enter the U.S. without a biological parent have either a biological parent living in the United States, an older sibling, or a more distant relative that they're able to be reunited with. It's, I believe, less than 10% of them that don't have a family member here in the United States. Catholic Charities Esperanza Center actually has an entire program
let's take a look
that
at our
works
peers, guys.
with family
reunification. Kind of
reunification.
remind you guys.
Oh, sorry, Juliana.
Oh, Catholic Charities Esperanza Center has a program that actually works specifically with these unaccompanied minors and their sponsors.
Is that a question? Or?
So we definitely, Catholic Charities is one of the nonprofits that does great work in this area, and make sure that you're in touch with me, my office, Katia, who's here. If you're having trouble, engaging with the folks at the Department of Health and Human Services in arranging for reuniting kids with family members here in the United States, because that's what's supposed to be happening, right? The goal is for unaccompanied minors to get them processed through, when someone comes across the border, their first interactions with Customs and Border Patrol. And the goal is to keep them in that custody for as short a time as possible. Under the court's decision in Flores, it's supposed to be 72 hours. And so because of the increase in numbers of unaccompanied adults, there was obviously a lot of pressure put on that system. So the Biden administration did react quickly to try to expand capacity for HHS, Health and Human Services, so that they could then take more of these children and try to quickly identify family members to reunite them with. And Catholic Charities and other organizations are are very helpful, of course, in that effort. And if you're having difficulty engaging with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, please let us know.
Okay, so any more questions for the senator?
Looks like you have Sarah. Sorry, I can't read your full name. Go ahead.
Okay, yes. Hi, my name is Sarah Salim Malad. I'm a staff attorney with Just Neighbors. We are an immigration legal services nonprofit in Virginia. And we recently expanded to serving clients in DC and Maryland as well, about a year ago. So we're excited to work with your office, and we've submitted congressional liaison inquiries. And so we're very thankful for your help on that. We are also identifying, and we try to identify kind of systemic issues that we notice that many of our clients are dealing with. And so I want to just know, is that something that we can submit to your office as we're seeing kind of patterns of problems that our immigrant clients are facing?
Yes, and thank you for the work that you're doing. And the short answer is yes. We have our Maryland offices deal with sort of individual constituent cases, but when we see a pattern of things happening, then we try and get engaged directly with the agencies on behalf of that, the broader problem in the system. So the short answer is yes. What are some of are there any particular what are the most acute things you're seeing right now in the system?
So recently, one issue, which, there are many that systemic issues. One of the issues that we found is that many VAWA recipients under the Violence Against Women Act are unable to obtain their Social Security numbers, which is really problematic for their ability to then work. And so it just navigating some of the things that they need to obtain in order to live, work, obtain their driver's license, are significant hurdles for them.
Right. So, I mean, that's a very great example. We will, I'll sort of huddle with my team on that issue, but we also, as you indicate, on an individual case basis, we can address those issues, but we also, we'll push the agencies to begin to expedite the process. Sometimes it's backlog, sometimes it's just bureaucracy. So giving them a push can be helpful. But if you do have, a list of individuals that you're trying to process, please let us know. To the extent that they're Marylanders, that helps, but to the extent that it's a larger issue, we can work with our other colleagues.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It looks like Gabriela, you're on mute. Senator, do you have time for one more question?
I can take one more, yes.
Okay, I think we'll turn to Cecia Fuentes, who is.
Thank you, Heather.
Yes. Hi, good morning, Senator. Thank you for being here this morning. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm Executive Director of the Latino Caucus in Annapolis. And we are, at least I'm seeing some nervousness around TPS, TPS. And I know we covered it a lot here in this morning's discussion, but I wanted to kind of get a feel for should people be nervous? The hope is that, holders or individuals with TPS, we're going to find some sort of pathway to citizenship. But for some of these countries, I know, for example, in Salvador, it's coming up, their off day is coming up pretty soon, I think sometime this fall. So what is, I guess, in your perspective, like the timeline looking like? Should people be nervous right now, or should people start to get ready a little bit to have to go back home and try and figure out to change their lives a little bit?
So I there's a chance I'm wrong about this, of course, but I don't think people should be nervous in the short term. And that is because I have a pretty good level of confidence that the Biden administration will recognize that there are continuing challenges in the countries where we granted TPS, and will be unlikely to change that status. Again, there's always uncertainty on that, but that is my sense. And if you look at the last 4 years, we really have the courts to thank for protecting TPS recipients, because the previous administration from day one was working to deport TPS recipients. I mean, they wanted to end the protective status of the El Salvadorian population and many others. They granted very few extensions of TPS in the previous administration, and it was only because the courts put a stay on the Trump administration actions that we did not see deportations. My best sense in talking to members of the Biden administration, my best sense is that they recognize that these countries are facing continuing problems. I mean, the government of El Salvador has really pleaded with the United States to extend TPS protection. And so I believe that this administration will continue to extend protection through the administrative process. But, in the longer run, this is exactly why I introduced the Secure Act, so that, TPS recipients would not be at the mercy of the political winds turning from one administration to the next, as we just saw happen from, the Obama administration to the Trump administration. That's why we want to pass, protection for dreamers, why we want to pass long-term protection for TPS recipients, so that there can be that's why we called it the Secure Act. So people can have, live with the security that they will not be deported. So bottom line is I think that I don't think people should be nervous in the short term, but we all need to work together to provide certainty in the long term.
I'm not sure what's happening with Gabriela's audio. So there you go. I can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry, that is so odd. But thank you, Senator. I was just saying thank you, and just we're so thrilled to have you and grateful for everything you're doing, and knowing that we have an ally on the Hill that we can go to and talk to and just sort of open our hearts to and help you out when you need us. Know that you can count on us, for getting some of those leverage points moving forward for you, so that how does it go? Help us, help you, help us.
Well, absolutely. Well, listen, thank you. You're definitely helping me help all of us. So I'm grateful. Thank you for everything you're doing. I'm really glad to see that this new organization is taking off under the umbrella of the Maryland nonprofits, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. And it's great to see everybody involved, because our political process only works when everybody is out on the playing field of our democracy, working hard. So please keep through all your different channels, putting pressure on all of our colleagues to move forward on these important issues.
Thank you so much, Senator. Have a great day and a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
We're with you in the good fight.
Thank you. Thanks for being great partners.
Oh, thank you. So for the rest of us, we still have a few minutes. I want to thank you all for joining us. I don't know if anybody has any additional comments they would like to make or wrap up with. Maybe Veronica and Heather can join me on this front. I know we have a lot going on. Our next event, by the way, will be on May 27th. I'm still working out the speakers, so I apologize for not having that ready for you. But we are going to have some really great news coming up soon related to vaccine equity and some good information we found out recently. I can't tell you what it is, but I know you're on pins and needles. So Heather, Veronica, any thoughts? Cecia, you're on the here too. Those are our board members.
Yes, well, I certainly always love hearing from Senator Van Hollen, and it is important having an ally, but you know, his tools are only as good as the advocacy that we can support
That's
him
right.
in. And I also wanted to thank and acknowledge Katia Chavez, who is here from Senator Van Hollen's office, and wanted to see Katia. Several people were asking a little bit about how to engage. Is there any advice that you have in terms of working with the staff in senators' offices like Senator Van Hollen, and ways that you might be able to interface with us?
Yes, so I was happy to see, I see some familiar names on the call, but if you have any issues, if you're having difficulties with an agency, USCIS, CBP, whatever it is, feel free to reach out to us. Our main email is assistance@vanhollen.senate.gov, and I'm going to put that in the chat. I also put my email there. I do I handle the immigration casework portfolio for Latin America, so I handle, delay green cards, work permits, expedite requests. So if you know of anyone that needs their assistance, please send them our way, and we'll have to go from there.
And we have your email in the chat too.
Excellent. Thank you, Katia. And as Gabriela said, Veronica and Cecia, I think we have some things to celebrate in Maryland, right?
Yes, I don't take up too much time because I know we're running out of time, but I'm just wonderful to be here with everyone. Wonderful to see the senators today. We have some things to celebrate in Maryland. The legislative session was very jam-packed, but luckily we had some great advocacy work, great added to, even though we were apart, there wasn't the normal hustle and bustle in the Capitol, but people were still showing up and giving amazing testimony to virtual, the virtual platform. But, we were able to pass significant immigration policy, ban ICE detention facilities moving forward, limit the interaction between law enforcement, ICE, and, even the tax credits to include ICE holders. We had a very successful session considering all things. It was going to be hard regardless, but the fact that we were able to move significant policies that would help Latinos, immigrants, documented, undocumented families, it was really wonderful, and I appreciate everyone's support. I know Gabriela was, the Driver's Privacy Act as well. Gabriela would email me once in a while for updates and just to see how everyone could be supportive. So that's a wonderful collective team effort. So thank you to everyone, really.
And then I'll quickly just chime in. This organization is a membership organization, so we can represent you collectively. So we invite you to join. The cost should not be preventive. We have scholarships, but the goal is to serve both sides of the house. American mainstream that wants to deal with Hispanics and serve them better. So if you're a nonprofit, if you're an organization that wants to be able to be more welcoming, more inclusive, we can facilitate that. On the opposite side, supporting Hispanic-led, Hispanic-serving organizations that may not have the capacity, the knowledge, the connections in the American mainstream, so that we're building that bridge that Gabriela mentioned in the beginning. So if we're not hearing from you, if you're not a member, we can't represent you. Gabriela, Heather, I, Cecia, we think we know all the issues, but we obviously can't have all the aspects covered. So we invite you to have a seat at our table, so that when we have sessions like this and we're speaking to policymakers, we're representing you appropriately. So here's my pitch to put your money where your mouth is. It's not big money, guys. It can also be waived, but participate with your signature, with your support, so that we are more cohesive, so that you're not working alone in your neck of the woods. You're not working on just your issue. Our goal is to amplify efforts. We don't want to do your work. We want to amplify it so it's more impactful, more effective, faster. And as you can see, Gabriela, Heather, and the team, we're hitting the ground running. We're seriously changing Maryland and the way Latinos are being served. We invite you to join us because we need all the hands we can get. The work, as you know, is massive. So Gabriela, Heather, you guys were awesome today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Veronica. And just to echo what Veronica said, I just added the link. Our website is now in English and in Spanish, www.marylandlatinosunidos.org. You can, we're slowly but surely translating more and more of the more like task-oriented types of things. We've recently translated the portion on how do you start a nonprofit into Spanish. So you can read about it if you're interested, if you're in a grassroots situation and you feel you're ready to begin a nonprofit yourselves. We're here to support you. We're here to provide technical assistance, capacity building, and hopefully what we are for you is a hub where we can help us, all of us, network through the state, join together and in coalition, each one with our individual missions, but all of us working towards a stronger Latino community for the state, but also for the state itself. When Latinos are stronger, the entire state is stronger. So the link is there. Please join us. Únanse a nosotros.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. And don't forget Frederick. Frederick needs
We
a lot
never
of help.
forget Frederick Rosario. we need, you and I need to connect separately.
Yes, we need, please. We need representative here in Frederick. Thank you.
Okay, you said that the last time too, and I said I would contact you, and I got
Rosario,
sick, and I didn't do it.
Yes.
Oye, Rosario, pon tu teléfono y tu email en el chateo para que te demos follow-up, ¿oíste?
Okay, perfect.
Do it
Thank you.
direct, yeah.
I will do it.
Gracias. Okay, everyone. So on that note of connectivity and everything else, I thank you all for joining us. I hope we've helped facilitate some of your questions and thoughts around the specific issues related to immigration. As you heard, it's massive. There's a lot of pieces to it, but it's all interconnected to our economic component of our national economy, but our state economy. You know, our governor, for example, has been very big on this TPS component, as well as the different visas for guest workers. We're going to continue to bring that all together because that's part of the immigration component as well. It's one we don't talk about as much. And there's the rural areas. We're looking forward, you know, like I said, our next meeting, our next event will be on May 27th. I said I wanted to share some good news with you. Let's just say that we're looking to create and really build out a Latino vaccine equity coalition. It looks like it's going to happen. Johns Hopkins has joined us, as well as the city of Annapolis, Casa de Maryland, Ayuda, and George Washington University, just to get the ball rolling. We'll have more information for you down the road, and we'll let you know more about how that's going to happen. There's a lot of good things going on. The seeds you have planted are sprouting, and because it's spring, it's a perfect analogy. I look forward to seeing the flowers and the fruit down the road. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you on May 27th. Have a great month.